Okay, so it's going live.
Are you going to do like a jump back in, or do you want me to just start talking? What do you want me to do?
This is part 2 of yesterday's documentation. So I'm going to let Mr. Brown continue talking about the master schedule.
So I think we were talking about lunch and specials
Yes.
yesterday for the first part. That's kind of where we left off. And so I think what we were discussing was that we just have to make sure that there's enough space for the larger groups. Again, there's only so many chairs in the cafeteria, so we have to be mindful of that and rotate the kids through there. Of course, this year is a lot different and a lot more difficult because I think we went from close to a 300 seat capacity in the cafeteria last year down to like 78 or something this year, just to make sure that the kids can space apart.
It was much quieter in there when I walked in there too.
Yes, so that definitely helps with noise, but that's kind of thrown a kink into the master schedule. It makes it easier because we do have half of the campus at home doing virtual learning and half face-to-face, so it's not as complicated, I guess, as it would be if we had all face-to-face and we were having to manage spacing out in the cafeteria like that.
So if we were to do all face-to-face, how would that change the master schedule?
So if we were all face-to-face and we were still required to do the social distancing aspect, it would probably mean that we would have to have like a 3-hour lunch block.
Okay.
Maybe minimum, because I think last year without social distancing, it was like 2.5 hours. So less kids in the cafeteria just means more time for each grade level to be able to rotate through. So it would just mean that our lunches would probably start at 10 and end at 1:30, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So definitely not ideal.
Now, would that have an impact on the teachers' conferences?
Correct.
Or, okay, so
Yeah,
that's where
I think so. Yeah.
time would come from.
That would be really hard.
Yes,
so I'm thankful, I guess, that our district is allowing us to give parents the option of doing ABL versus face-to-face, because it would be hard.
Yeah.
To do social distancing with that many kids.
So if we're not social distancing and we weren't in the time for COVID, it would be about a 2.5 hour rotation for lunch.
Correct. Well, so last year we had about 800, a little over 800 kids on campus. This year we're down to 715 with the rezoning.
Okay.
So that was going to kind of whittle down our lunch times a little bit anyway, by maybe 30 minutes or so.
That's good.
So just the more kids total just obviously means more time that you have to schedule for lunch.
That makes sense.
Rotations, and they typically have to start earlier and end later.
Okay. All right.
The other thing I wanted to mention that I don't think I got to yesterday was, and this might come across sounding bad for the primary grades, but another thing to think of when you're doing master schedule is, data has shown that your core subjects, math, reading, the ones that are heavily tested, the ones that are a lot more rigorous, content-wise, you don't really want to schedule them first thing in the morning or the last thing in the end of the day. So looking at like a junior high or a secondary schedule, it would be anywhere between like second and sixth period, where you're trying to get math and reading typically, like in the middle. You don't want it too early, too late, because kids come, they're groggy, they're not fully awake.
Right.
By the end of the day, if they're not strong in one of those two subjects, they're tired, they're wiped out. They just don't have the energy to concentrate to get to where they need to be in those subjects. So we kind of do the same thing here for 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, to where, they're kind of getting the meat of that content in the middle part of the day, not necessarily the beginning or the end. And of course, you can't do that for everybody. Yeah. But it's just one thing that we try to do for 3rd through 5th. Not saying that kinder 1st and 2nd is not important, but that's just kind of
I didn't know that.
The reality of state assessment, and having to.
See, I didn't know that. The one thing I do talk to the teachers about, because a lot of new self-contained teachers came and talked to me this year about was when do I schedule reading and when do I do math? And my opinion for them was similar to what you just said. I told them reading probably in the morning because it's more sit down reading and doing on your own, and math and science towards the afternoon, because with math and science you can do more movement.
Yeah.
And so you can after lunch they're a little more.
Yeah, that's true, and I think that's definitely true for elementary, because you can do incorporate movement.
Mhm.
Not that you wouldn't in secondary, but I
Right.
think it happens a lot more in elementary.
Right.
But yeah, I think that's true, and it's going to be different for every kid too. You know, some kids are obviously stronger in one or the other, so
Right.
just kid by kid. But I think overall, in general, just trying to get it in the meat of the day.
That is really
seems to help.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to look at that article.
SPED schedule. I don't think we talked about that yesterday either. We did talk a little bit, I think, about chunking or trying to group our kids together with similar service
Mhm.
times. So kids are receiving, let's say, dyslexia services or speech services. We're going to try to group them in the same homerooms so that those specialists are able to grab them, and it's just easier for their schedule.
Right.
So we have to be mindful of that too when we're building the master schedule for a campus. Is we have to talk to all the campus specialists to make sure that it fits with their needs. And so a lot of times we share them. So right now, Miss Phillip, our speech pathologist,
Mhm.
this year she is, I think we're one of 3 campuses that she visits.
Oh, wow.
And I think she was solely here last year, so it wasn't that big of a deal. But now we're sharing her with 2 other campuses, so now we're having to make sure that we work with her on her time.
Miss Nelson's the same way, correct? Is she with
Yes.
2 other campuses?
Yes, so that kind of ties into master scheduling too, somewhat, scheduling arts
Mm-hmm.
and things like that. We do all of ours on Mondays typically. For anything that's not speech related, we'll do it on Mondays, and that's just because that's when she's available,
Mhm.
and that's when Miss Van Loon and myself have time to visit those arts. Now, Miss Phillip last year was not here on Mondays, so we had to do all of our speech arts on Fridays.
Okay.
So it's just one more little piece. And again, that doesn't really affect the whole campus schedule, but it's just one more scheduling.
But it does affect
Component.
their specialist schedules and the teachers who have to be able to
That's
be
right, yeah.
involved.
Yeah, the
in the
teachers
arts.
have to be available, on Mondays and Fridays.
Okay.
Yes.
And PLC time, does that build into the master schedule as well?
Yeah, so I think yesterday what we were talking about is, I think we spoke more to how PLC coverage would need to have paraprofessional coverage.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to make sure that we're spacing out our paras evenly, so that they can go provide coverage for those teachers so that they can go to PLC meetings together. Kind of like the common planning time. I don't know that we mentioned a lot about that yesterday, but we want our teachers to be able to obviously plan together.
Right.
And that kind of goes hand in hand with what you were saying about PLCs, is that we want teams to be able to sit and plan. I mean, that's the purpose. If you can't have a whole team planning together at the same time, you're having to pull them all at different times, and it's just not as efficient or effective as it could be. That's a barrier, a challenge that we're hitting this year, is that we, as you know, we have designated ABL teachers versus designated face-to-face teachers, and the district has said the ABL teachers have one schedule and face-to-face is our schedule, what we plan for them.
Right.
And so they're upset about that this year. I think rightfully so, because they can't plan with their teams. And so we're
Right.
having to be creative on how we can get them together. So right now what we're encouraging is for them to try to plan during the asynchronous time,
Right.
when the ABL teacher students are just doing things independently. And that's kind of the best solution we have this year for that particular challenge, but it's not ideal.
No, it's not, because I think that's a little more work on those AVL teachers to have to get that asynchronous time. And then they also have to think about, I know I had a conversation with one of the 5th grade teachers where during her asynchronous time is later than the planning time for face-to-face teachers. And during her time is when the specialists pull her kiddos.
Okay,
So that's
it's another conflict.
another conflict.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we've asked the district if we can maybe not be as rigid with that particular schedule, but the way it is right now with over 400 kids on our campus that are signed up for ABL, we're just kind of having to stick to what they've suggested up to this point. So I will just continue to see how that goes after all the face-to-face kids finally come back on the 14th, and we'll see what the teams say and how the planning during asynchronous time is working, and if they're able to work it out, and if not, then we'll, I'm sure, plead our case to the district again to see if there's anything we can do
I hope that they can
about the schedule.
change that, because that'll affect everybody.
Yeah, definitely. Yesterday we talked about when you're developing the master schedule, the kids' needs, first.
Mhm.
So getting, meeting those needs, individual needs, group needs first for the kids. Secondary would be obviously the common planning time for your teams. Obviously, making sure that everybody gets to eat. Everybody, of course, by law has to have that 30-minute lunch. But again, you want it to be somewhat close together so that they get to, have that bonding time if they want as
Right.
a team and get to eat together as a team if they would like to do that. I think we talked about designated minutes, right, for PE. The kids have to have a certain number of minutes dictated by the state for how much exercise time they get. So we have to make sure that their PE time is X amount of minutes per day. To us, that equates to like 50 minutes, which is what our normal specialist time is anyway, so that works.
Trying to think of.
Our ESL population, I don't think we talked about
No, I
that
did not.
yesterday.
Mm-mm.
That's another consideration that we have to think about when we're developing the master schedule, just as we would for SPED or 504. We have to make sure that when we're placing students into classes, that they're going into, our ESL students are going into classrooms with teachers that are ESL certified.
Mhm.
It's highly encouraged that all of our teachers across the board are ESL certified, K through 5. And for those that aren't, we do like an emergency waiver for a year.
Right.
That's neither here nor there, but it still comes into play. We don't even like to put kids into a classroom with a waiver teacher, if at all possible. So when yesterday we talked about the spring prior, we start planning master schedule based off of the current teacher's suggestions on where kids should be placed. And that's one more criteria. So we're looking at forming classes with a good mix of boys and girls, different ethnicities and racial backgrounds, and then ESL, our ESL population too. I mean, we're trying to make sure that they're going into a classroom with a certified teacher. And I think we talked about GT yesterday
Yes.
as well. Our gifted and talented kids have to be placed with a teacher that's certified to be able to provide those very specialized services. And then Miss McCord, our advanced academic specialist, has to have her own mini schedule that fits within the master schedule to be able to service all of those kids. And she has to work with our teachers, our teachers that have those GT kids, so that she can work out a time to be able to push into their classrooms and pull those kids out when she needs them without disrupting the teacher's day too much, the content areas.
So basically, like the whole master schedule has to work for every single person on this campus.
Yes. So, and that kind of goes back to the whole Rubik's Cube thing yesterday that we were talking about. And just helping people to understand the larger picture and not be so, we want people to be passionate about their kids and their specialty, right? So if you're a math teacher, we want you to be passionate about math and reading, what have you. But you can't be so rigid and stuck in your own mindset that you're not at least attempting to look at the needs of the whole campus.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it's not necessarily change, it's just like we were talking about yesterday, just shifting. Maybe shifting what you've always done, maybe looking at it from a different angle and seeing how you can do it differently.
Yeah.
Or adjusting the timing a little bit so that you can help somebody else make their schedule fit. Like Miss McCord, like Miss Salazar, the dyslexia specialist. All of our specialists have to be able to pull their kids. And so everybody kind of has to work together and be flexible, I guess, right? That seems like the word of the year this year is flexibility. But everybody truly has to be flexible so that we're all working together to make it work, make the whole campus go.
I think that's going to be tough for me when I get into a principal position, is learning how to do that master schedule. So maybe next year, if we have to revamp it, I can talk to Stacy and I can be really involved in helping plan it out. I'm sure she has the baseline done.
Sure.
But that way I can pick her brain and your brain about how you put it together. Because I think
Absolutely.
I'm going to be very much like you, where I have to put it up on a whiteboard or put it up on something and move things around in order for me to be able to see if it fits in. And I think after I do that once or twice, I'm going to be able to visualize it a lot better.
It's so intimidating, but just remember too that you're not doing it by yourself.
Right.
I have to remind myself of that as well. And of course, Miss Van Lunen as the principal, that's her main charge, is to make sure that it works. And so she does really the bulk of it. But
A
she
lot of
doesn't do
pressure.
it all by herself.
Right.
Right? She kind of has the template and the format for what she's envisioning, but that's why she brings everybody else in for the collaboration, because people are going to remind her and myself of, have you thought of that? Have you considered that?
Right.
And most of the time she has, but every now and then, just like now, right? Every day is a new challenge with the whole virus thing, and it's almost like every day is the first day of school.
It does.
And there's you can't think of every little detail. It's impossible. And so that's why you use your team, and that's why you hire good people so that you can be supported in things like the master schedule.
And I'm sure this year was a little easier, regardless of the fact that we have our pandemic. But since last year we had dual language, that was another whole piece that had to be put in there. And now not having to deal with them switching and who's doing what and teaching two different classes at the same time, or
two different grade levels.
two different grade levels at the
right?
same time. Yeah,
What was that? 4 teachers last year were teaching
two
different grade
mhm.
levels.
So
Yeah,
flip flopping,
that
and
was-
then doing the different conference times and figuring out who to meet with. So
Exactly.
I think that was a really good thing. But thank you so much for sitting down with me. I know
You're
that
welcome.
it's been a little crazy week, so I appreciate you.
Hey, I hope
taking
it
the
helped.
time to
I know
just-
I kind of shot off in a lot of different
No, I think that
directions, but the more I talked, the more things I thought of. So
the whole thing helped. I think it's going to be. I'm one of those people who we can talk about everything, but until I actually physically do it,
Yeah.
I'm not going to be able to truly understand it.
Right.
So I once I can actually do it, then I'm going to be able to apply a lot more of what I've learned from you
sure.
to that.
Right. And there's a lot of things that you'll talk about that you won't remember until you actually do it.
Probably.
Yeah, because I'm the same way. I have to apply it before it sticks.
All right. Yes, end.
Can you give me the time?